200 Apache warriors do not simply arrive at your barn by chance, they come driven by a desire for vengeance, justice, or conflict. William Bill Miller was soon about to discover the true reason behind their presence. But first, let us rewind to the moment everything began 24 hours earlier. The Arizona sun beat down relentlessly on Bill's ranch, located somewhere between Phoenix and the middle of nowhere, when he first noticed a small figure staggering across his land. At 34, Bill had encountered his share of troubles while working with cattle, yet there was something about this morning that felt off. It was wrong, even. He was repairing a broken fence post close to the creek when sudden movement caught his attention. A child, no older than 8 or 9, was walking unsteadily in zigzag patterns toward his water supply. The child's clothes were tattered traditional Native American garments that had clearly seen better days. Even from afar, Bill could tell how hunger weighed down every step. Most ranchers nearby would have grabbed their rifles before asking questions, as relations between settlers and the local Apache tribes had been strained for years, with constant raids raising tensions. However, Bill had always been different, perhaps too different to the point of his own detriment. He put down his tools and approached the child carefully, keeping his hands visible and his movements slow. As he drew nearer, he realized it was a young girl with dark eyes far too large for her slender face, her lips cracked dry from thirst. When she looked up at him, everything changed. A mix of fear and desperation struck him like a hard blow to the stomach. The girl spoke quickly in Apache words he could not understand, but her message was unmistakable. She was starving, possibly not having eaten for many days. Her tiny hands moved first toward her mouth and then toward the creek, using a universal gesture of need that crossed any cultural boundary. William Bill Miller thought about his neighbors and how they might react if they saw him helping an Apache child. He recalled the warnings he had heard around town about recent conflicts with the tribes. He considered what would be wise, what would be safe. Yet, when he looked again into those desperate eyes, he made a choice that would alter everything. Without saying a word, Bill lifted the girl into his arms. She was almost weightless and allowed him to carry her toward his cabin. She offered no resistance, likely too weak to struggle even if she wished to. As he walked, he felt her small body trembling, unsure whether from fear or hunger or a combination of both. Inside his humble home, Bill gently placed her in his only chair and hurried to prepare something to eat. He had leftover stew from the previous night still warm on the stove, along with fresh bread he had baked that very morning. The aroma of the food seemed to revive the girl a little, and for the first time he noticed what looked like a flicker of hope in her eyes. While serving the stew into a bowl, Bill suddenly noticed something that made his blood run cold. Near the girl's, her neck was partly concealed by torn fabric, but a striking necklace caught his eye. It was a complex arrangement of beads and designs he recognized well. Just the previous week, his neighbor, old Frank Smith, had described those exact patterns to him. These were the ceremonial beads belonging to the family of Chief Red Eagle, the most influential Apache leader in the area. William Bill Miller's hand froze midway as he was about to offer her the bowl. If this girl was truly who he suspected, he wasn't merely aiding a starving child, but sheltering the daughter of a man who could summon 200 warriors at a moment's notice without hesitation. However, it was too late to turn back now. The girl's trembling hands were already reaching for the food, and Bill couldn't bring himself to send her away. He gave her the bowl and observed as she ate with the raw desperation of someone who had not tasted food for several days. What Bill did not realize was that less than 20 miles away, an Apache tracking group had just discovered the girl's path leading straight to his ranch. Chief Red Eagle himself was leading this contingent, his face hardened by anger and sorrow, signaling disastrous consequences for anyone who had taken his daughter. The girl finished her meal and lifted her eyes to Bill, showing something that could have been appreciation. But as the long shadows of the late afternoon crept across the land, Bill could not shake the uneasy sensation that he had made either the wisest choice of his life or the final one he would ever make. Soon, the girl drifted into sleep in Bill's chair. After nearly 1 hour, exhaustion finally overcame her. William Bill Miller covered the fragile girl with his sole blanket, trying to convince himself that he had made the right choice. However, as nightfall drew near, his certainty began to waver. The sound of horses galloping on the dirt path caused his stomach to tighten. Bill looked through the window and noticed his neighbor John Davis racing toward his cabin, accompanied by two men he recognized from town, Deputy Sheriff Mark Wilson and Reverend Robert Johnson. Before they could dismount, Bill hurried outside, hoping to keep their voices low and avoid disturbing the girl, yet John was already yelling before his horse halted completely. "Bill, you foolish man, what on earth are you thinking?" His face was flushed with anger and something resembling fear. "Wilson says he spotted smoke signals from the hills earlier today. The Apache are searching for something or someone." Deputy Mark Wilson grimly agreed. "My father sent word from town. Chief Red Eagle's daughter has been missing for 3 days after a hunting trip. She apparently got separated and lost during a storm." He paused, carefully studying Bill's expression. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about this missing Apache girl, would you?" Bill felt his throat tighten. It would be wise to lie, to send them away and solve this alone, but these men were long-time neighbors. Despite their imperfections, they came out of sincere concern. "She's inside," Bill said. He spoke softly, half-starved and worn out. "I could not just leave her to perish." The silence that followed was overwhelming. Reverend Robert Johnson was the first to break it, his voice barely above a whisper. "Son, do you realize what you have done?" "I helped a hungry child," William Bill Miller replied. Yet even as he said it, he sensed how naive it sounded. John Davis began pacing, running his hands through his hair. "They will think you took her. In fact, they probably already do. Chief Red Eagle has been known to destroy entire villages for far less than this." Deputy Mark Wilson was already edging toward his horse. "I have to report this, Bill." "It is my responsibility, but I will give you a warning. Get her back to her people before they catch you here." "In the dark?" Bill asked. "She can barely walk." "And how am I supposed to approach an Apache camp without being riddled with arrows?" "That is your problem now," Wilson said, mounting his horse. "I am heading to town to alert everyone. If Chief Red Eagle decides to make an example of you, he might not stop at your ranch alone." As the 3 men departed, Bill remained solitary in the deepening night, hearing the girl's faint breaths from inside the cabin. He contemplated saddling up to find the Apache camp, but knew it would be suicide. He considered loading her into his wagon to reach the nearest town, but that would only worsen matters. The truth was, there was no good escape. Every path led to danger. In the very same spot, a confrontation was about to unfold with one of the most dreaded war leaders in Arizona. As if called forth by his thoughts, a new sound floated over the plains. The distant beat of war drums steadily approached, growing closer with every passing moment. William Bill Miller's blood turned cold. They were not waiting for dawn. The Apache were arriving tonight. Bill hurried back into the cabin, his mind racing with urgency. The war drums grew louder, and he could now discern distinct beats within the rhythm, slow, deliberate, and utterly chilling. This was not the chaotic clatter of a raiding group. It was something far more disciplined and incomparably perilous. The girl shifted in her chair, awakened by the drum beats. Her eyes opened wide, and for the first time since he found her, Bill noticed recognition flash across her face. She grasped the meaning of those drums far better than he did. She spoke quickly in Apache, pointing toward the door and then at herself. Even without knowing her words, Bill sensed the fear in her gestures. She was attempting to convey something vital, but the language barrier left them unable to understand one another. Bill knelt beside her chair and spoke as gently as he could. "I know you don't understand me, little one, but I'm trying to protect you. Those drums mean your people are coming for you, aren't they?" The girl nodded eagerly, then grabbed Bill's shirt and pulled him toward the window. She pointed outside and raised both hands, opening and closing her fingers to emphasize her message. William Bill Miller counted silently beside her. Movements went 10, 20, 30, and continued until it seemed he had counted close to 200. His legs weakened at the sight of 200 warriors. He had hoped for maybe a dozen furious braves he might reason with somehow. But 200 was enough to destroy every ranch for 50 miles. Then the drums stopped abruptly, and the silence that followed felt worse than the noise had been. Bill moved to the window, peering into the darkness. At first, nothing appeared, but then, like phantoms emerging from the night itself, shapes began to take form, moving across his land. They rode in flawless formation, warriors on horseback arranged in a broad semicircle gradually closing around his cabin. Even in the moonlight, Bill could see the war paint streaked across their faces, feathers woven in their hair, weapons clutched tightly in their hands. These were not men seeking peace or negotiation. The girl pulled on Bill's sleeve once more, this time pointing to herself and then toward the door. She wanted to go to them, but Bill was uncertain if it would help or only make things worse. What if they thought he had harmed her? What if they doubted that she had come willingly? Suddenly a single voice rang out from the darkness, speaking English with a thick accent but clear and firm. "White man, we know you have taken something that belongs to us. Send out the girl and maybe you will live to see morning." Bill's mouth became dry as the voice carried undeniable command. This had to be Chief Red Eagle. Red Eagle himself, Bill had heard countless tales about the man, how he had brought together several tribes under his command, and how he had never suffered defeat against the cavalry. Now, Bill was about to confront him through a tense exchange that could easily end with everyone dead. Bill moved toward the door, but the girl grabbed his arm with an unexpected strength for someone so small. She shook her head urgently and pointed to herself, then made a cutting motion across her throat. She was attempting to warn him about something, but what exactly? Suddenly it struck him like a lightning bolt. The girl was not only the chief's daughter, but his only daughter. In Apache tradition, that made her priceless, not only family, but the future of the bloodline. If anything were to happen to her while under Bill's care, even if it was not his fault, Chief Red Eagle would have no choice but to make an example of him, a warning other settlers would never forget. Fear grew inside Bill as he realized that saving the girl's life might have been the easiest part. Now he had to convince 200 armed warriors that he had rescued her, not kidnapped her. He had about 30 seconds to figure out how to do so before Chief Red Eagle lost his patience and turned Bill's ranch into a war zone. Bill faced the toughest decision of his life. He opened the cabin door and stepped outside with his hands raised, the girl close behind him. The scene that awaited him was straight from his worst nightmares, 200 men waiting. Apache warriors sat perfectly still on their horses, forming a flawless circle around William Bill Miller's land. War paint shone under the moonlight, and every weapon was aimed straight at him. At the forefront of the group sat Chief Red Eagle, a towering figure with streaks of silver running through his long black hair and eyes burning with restrained anger. The girl ran toward her father, shouting in Apache. However, instead of the happy reunion Bill had hoped for, Red Eagle's face darkened even more. The chief dismounted and knelt beside his daughter, inspecting her closely as she spoke quickly, pointing back toward Bill in the cabin. Although Bill could not understand the language, the chief's body language was clear. Every muscle in Red Eagle's body was tense, as if ready to unleash violence. Whatever the girl was conveying was not improving the situation. At last, Red Eagle rose and approached Bill with slow, deliberate steps. The other warriors stayed on their horses but adjusted their weapons, producing a sound reminiscent of rattlesnakes ready to attack. "My daughter tells me you fed her," Red Eagle stated, his English sharp and unyielding. "She says you gave her refuge." He stopped just out of reach, close enough for Bill to notice the complex battle scars etched across the chief's chest, proof of countless victories and foes overcome. Bill answered firmly, steadier than he felt. "Yes, she was starving. William Bill Miller could not bear to let a child perish." Chief Red Eagle observed him silently for a long moment. "She said to me that you noticed the sacred beads belonging to our lineage around her neck. You knew her identity, yet you chose not to return her to us immediately." Bill's heart sank deeply. This was the point when everything unraveled. "I planned to bring her back at dawn because she was too fragile to travel during the night." "Perhaps," Chief Red Eagle interjected, "or maybe you intended to keep her as a bargaining chip to exchange for cattle, horses, or safe passage across our lands." The accusation lingered heavily, like smoke rising from a solemn funeral pyre. Bill felt the intense scrutiny of 200 pairs of eyes upon him, warriors poised for their leader's command to transform this discussion into carnage. "That is not true," Bill protested. "I never asked anything from you." I simply could not stand witnessing a child in pain. What would you do if you were in Bill's place? Would you throw yourself on the mercy of a war chief who has shown no clemency to any white man, or would you stand firm and justify your choices even if it meant facing certain death? Share your thoughts in the comments. I need to understand which path you would choose. The decision Bill made next was crucial. It held the power to decide whether the sun would rise on a new era of peace or illuminate a war destined to engulf the entire region. Chief Red Eagle raised his hand, and instantly every warrior pulled back their bowstrings in flawless harmony. The sound of 200 arrows being drawn simultaneously was as terrifying as death itself preparing to strike. "You will prove your words," the chief declared quietly, "or you will perish right where you stand." William Bill Miller's thoughts raced as he gazed upon 200 arrow tips shimmering under the moonlight. How can you convince a man of kindness when all he has witnessed from your people is cruelty? Suddenly, an idea struck him like a flash of lightning. "Your daughter wore this when I found her," Bill declared calmly, reaching into his pocket. Every warrior tensed, but he revealed a small scrap of torn cloth, part of the girl's original garment that had caught on his fence post. "I held onto it because I figured you would want proof that I did not harm her." Chief Red Eagle examined the fabric carefully, a hint of recognition appearing in his eyes. It truly came from his daughter's ceremonial robe, the one she had on the night she vanished. Bill continued, his voice gaining strength. "She came to my water source. I could have chased her away or even shot her for trespassing, but I chose instead to carry her to my home. I gave her my own food and blanket without asking for anything in return." Suddenly the girl spoke, tugging on her father's sleeve and pointing toward the cabin. She rushed to the door and motioned for him to follow. Though puzzled, Red Eagle gestured for Bill to come inside with them. Inside the cabin, the girl indicated the chair where she had rested, then the empty bowl that had once held the stew Bill had offered. She mimed eating, then sleeping, before pointing at Bill and smiling, a warm, sincere smile, the first he had witnessed from her. Yet Red Eagle's focus was drawn elsewhere. On the table lay one of William Bill Miller's most treasured items was a small tin-type photograph of his family. His wife and young son had both succumbed to a cholera epidemic 3 years prior. The image was faded from constant handling and was surrounded by dried wildflowers that Bill replaced every week. Chief Red Eagle quietly remarked, "You have lost children too." For the first time, his voice carried something beyond anger. "My son was close to her age," Bill responded, his voice tight. "Maybe that is why I could not turn her away." Chief Red Eagle picked up the photograph, examining the faces of Bill's lost family. Outside, the warriors held their positions, yet the mood had noticeably changed. The girl kept chatting in Apache, seemingly recounting every detail to her father about how Bill had cared for her. "She says, 'You could have taken advantage,'" Chief Red Eagle translated. "A lone white man with an Apache child could have demanded ransom or used her as a shield. Instead, you fed her and let her rest." Bill nodded solemnly. "I have no conflict with your people, Chief. I just tend to my land and try to live peacefully." Chief Red Eagle remained silent for a long moment, still holding the photograph. When he finally spoke, his words caught everyone off guard, even his daughter. "My warriors expected to find a kidnapper tonight. They were ready to burn this place to the ground and take your scalp as proof of our justice." Carefully setting the photograph down, he added, "Instead, we find a man who showed kindness to a child who could." Though William Bill Miller recognized him as an adversary, he felt a flicker of hope within his chest. Yet the restless sounds outside told a different story. 200 warriors had arrived seeking retribution, while their leader spoke of mercy. Such a mismatch between expectations and reality could transform disappointment into fierce rage. Nevertheless, a serious dilemma remained. Chief Red Eagle kept speaking, and Bill's fragile hope began to shatter. "My warriors must not return empty-handed. They cannot face their families and say we rode out to punish an offense only to return with empty words." Bill's blood chilled as he asked what that meant. Chief Red Eagle explained, "Despite your innocent intent, you have created a situation that demands a solution. My people expect justice this night, and if they do not receive it—" He nodded toward the door where voices grew louder with agitation. "Some of my young warriors believe any white man who harms an Apache child deserves punishment. They think I am weak for choosing talk over combat." Outside, cries in Apache echoed, their tone unmistakable. They called for blood. If you are captivated by this tale, hit subscribe now, because what unfolds next will change everything. Chief Red Eagle met Bill's gaze firmly. "Only one path can uphold both justice and honor tonight. But it will require from you a sacrifice that may be more difficult than death itself, Shadow Wolf." Shadow Wolf moved straight into Chief Red Eagle's way, his scarred face twisted with fury. He spoke quickly in Apache, his voice growing louder with each word, and William Bill Miller did not need a translation to grasp the challenge being issued. Chief Red Eagle's reply was calm but resolute, and Bill observed as the two men stood face to face. Chief Red Eagle representing authority, strength rooted in sorrow-driven anger. The girl pressed closer to Bill's side, and he could sense her shaking. Other warriors began taking sides, some gathering behind Shadow Wolf, others staying loyal to their chief. The disciplined order that had marked their arrival started to crumble. Bill realized he was witnessing a moment that could divide the tribe. Shadow Wolf pointed his spear at Bill, shouting something that earned agreement from several warriors. Chief Red Eagle's jaw clenched tightly, and when he spoke again, his voice held the unmistakable weight of a final warning. Yet Shadow Wolf did not retreat. He took one more step forward, close enough that the tip of his spear nearly touched Chief Red Eagle's chest. The message was clear: uphold the ancient law of vengeance or be considered weak by the younger fighters. Then the girl did something unexpected. She stepped between the two men and began speaking quickly and fervently in Apache. Her youthful voice sliced through the tension like a blade, and Bill saw Shadow Wolf's expression change from anger to confusion, and then to something else. Chief Red Eagle conveyed the story quietly. She was recounting every detail: how she became lost during the storm, wandered through the wilderness for several days without food or water, and anticipated dying alone on the open prairie until someone found her. The girl's voice gained strength with every word she spoke. She first pointed to William Bill Miller, then to herself, describing her exhausting struggle with hunger and thirst before rescue. Even the warriors standing with Shadow Wolf were captivated by her tale. Now she described your family photograph. Chief Red Eagle explained how he saw the sorrow in your eyes as you gazed upon it. He said you helped her not out of malice toward our people, but because you understood the pain of loss. Shadow Wolf relaxed his grip on his spear, yet his expression remained doubtful. He addressed the girl directly, and Bill caught a word he knew: Wasichu, the Apache word for white man, used with resentment. The girl's reply was swift and fierce. She stepped closer to Shadow Wolf, speaking with such passion that several warriors took a step back. Whatever she said, it shook them deeply. She asked if he had children. Chief Red Eagle translated, his surprise clear in his voice. The girl posed a challenging question. What would he want a stranger to do if his child was starving alone in the wild? At that moment, Shadow Wolf let his spear fall to his side, but the girl still had more to say, and she continued without pause. The words were now aimed at all the warriors. Around them, William Bill Miller noticed the impact. It rippled through the crowd as stern faces began to soften. She was telling them that criticizing you for your compassion would make us no different from the soldiers who kill without asking questions first. She meant that if we punish mercy, we become the very monsters the white man imagines us to be. The silence that followed was overwhelming. 200 warriors sat still, absorbing the words of an 8-year-old girl who had just questioned their deepest convictions about justice and revenge. At last, Shadow Wolf spoke, his voice barely audible. Chief Red Eagle's interpretation came slowly. He said perhaps the spirit sent his brother a teacher instead of an enemy. He suggested that sometimes the smallest voices bring the greatest wisdom. Bill sensed a change in the atmosphere. The tension hadn't vanished, but shifted into something different. Maybe uncertainty, or possibly the start of understanding. Chief Red Eagle looked at Bill with what might have been respect and said, "My daughter has just achieved something extraordinary. She turned a war party into a council meeting, but now comes the most difficult task. What is that? Now you must convince them that her trust in you was well placed. Tonight, in our village, before the elders who have spent their whole lives despising your people. Red Eagle motioned toward his horse and asked, "Are you prepared to stake your life on your word?" William Bill Miller gazed down at the girl who looked back at him with the same pleading eyes that had ignited this entire ordeal. However, this time he understood she was not asking for his assistance. Instead, she was offering her own. Somehow, that changed everything. The journey to the Apache village lasted 3 hours through landscapes Bill had never encountered before, full of hidden canyons and secret trails unknown to his people. As they neared the settlement, Bill noticed numerous fires glowing softly in the darkness and heard the murmuring voices spreading news of their arrival. The tribal council gathered at once despite the late hour. 7 elders sat around a central fire in a semicircle, their aged faces solemn in the flickering light. Bill stood at the center, painfully aware that he might have been the first white man to enter this sacred place and live to recount the experience. Chief Red Eagle began by explaining the details surrounding his daughter's rescue. Then John Davis added his voice, still insisting on traditional justice despite his earlier change of heart. The discussion continued back and forth in Apache for what seemed like hours. Bill comprehended little except the occasional gesture aimed at him. Eventually the girl stepped forward once more, her voice steady and deliberate, yet filled with undeniable resolve. She spoke for nearly 10 minutes without ever averting her gaze from the elders' faces. When she finished, the eldest of the group responded. An elderly man with completely white hair addressed her with a single question. Her reply was instant and firm. Chief Red Eagle then turned to William Bill Miller. He asked if she truly believed she would risk her life to rescue an Apache child once more, fully aware of the potential consequences. Without a moment's pause, she answered yes. The elders exchanged whispered discussions among themselves. Bill felt his heart race as he awaited their verdict, knowing that the next moments would determine his fate. The white-haired elder rose slowly, his joints creaking from age. When he spoke, his voice held the weight of many years of wisdom. He said, as translated by Chief Red Eagle, that the spirits have presented a test this evening. It is not a test of our skill in battle, but a test of recognizing when mercy deserves mercy in return. Relief washed over Bill as his knees almost buckled, but the elder was not done. Safe passage back to Bill's land would be granted. Furthermore, the tribe would offer their protection. Any Apache who harmed Bill or his belongings would have to answer to the council. Bill could barely find words. He stammered, "I do not know what to say." The elder continued through Chief Red Eagle's translation. There was one condition. Bill must promise that if any of their people came to him in need, hungry, injured, or lost, he would treat them with the same kindness he showed the child. "I promise," Bill replied without hesitation. What followed astonished everyone. The girl ran to Bill and embraced him tightly. Speaking in imperfect English for the first time, she said, "Thank you for saving me. Now I save you." As daylight spread across the prairie, William Bill Miller returned to his ranch accompanied by an escort of honor instead of a war party. The two cultures that were moments away from conflict instead discovered a connection through one cowboy's simple kindness. Bill's ranch became a safe meeting place where Apache and settlers could come together without fear. He never grew wealthy or famous, yet spent his days knowing that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can stop the greatest disasters. Each year, on the anniversary of that night, a young Apache woman, no longer a hungry child but a respected member of her tribe, would visit Bill's ranch for a meal and to remember the night when two worlds chose understanding instead of battle. The girl who had once begged for food became a translator and peacemaker between the tribes and settlers. Bill lived until the age of 73, passing away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by friends from both cultures who had learned that true bravery is not always about fighting, but also about knowing when to nourish a hungry child instead. If you love these amazing true stories from the Old West, hit subscribe because we have many more adventures of courage, conflict, and unexpected heroes just waiting for you. Now tap the video on the screen to discover a tale even more incredible than this one. with a twist so astonishing you will not forget it. I will not forget this moment anytime soon. Make sure to click on the video.